Text reading, chapter 2, the illusion of separation. We need to pay attention what's the meaning of illusion. Illusion here, L-U-S, loss, means play. Il is in actually, so it's into the play. When my son was very young boy, he loved working with the logo. He always he spent hours on the logo every single day. He was able to make animals and airplanes and cars and robots, and it was very interesting to see him while he's making it. Once he made it, he just get into the world of imagination, and then he became pilot. He became animals, he became robot, and then he was playing in his imagination, forgetting about he's a just boy here in this in reality. So illusion means you just get into the play and forget about who you are in reality, and then you are becoming something completely imaginary persons. That's what illusion means. So here separation has never happened in reality, but we fell asleep because we identify with the body ego. So the illusion of separation means separation is illusion. It's not true. So chapter 2 is illusion of separation. This section deals with the fundamental misuse of knowledge, referred to in the Bible as the cause of the fall or separation. There are some definitions which I ask you to take from the dictionary, which will be helpful here. They are somewhat unusual since they are not the first definitions which are given. Nevertheless, the fact that each of them does appear in the dictionary should be reassuring. Project, verb, to extend forward or out. Project, noun, a plan in the mind, world, a natural grand division. We will refer later to projection as related to both mental health and mental illness. And we have already observed that man can create an empty shell, but he cannot create nothing at all. This means that man has to create something. He just cannot create nothing at all. This emptiness provides the screen for the misuse of projection. The Garden of Eden, which is described as a literal garden in the Bible, was not an actual garden at all. It was merely a mental state of complete need lack. Even in the literal account, it is noteworthy that pre-separation state was essentially one in which man needed nothing. The tree of knowledge is also overly literal figure. These concepts needed to be clarified before the real meaning of the separation or the detour into fear can be fully understood. So separation was actually detour into fear. So 5, to project as defined above is a fundamental attribute of God, which he gave to his son. In the creation, God projected his creative ability from himself to the souls he created, and he also imbued them with the same loving will to create. The soul has not only been fully created, but has also been created perfect. There is no emptiness in it. Because of its likeness to its creator, it is creative. No child of God can lose this ability because it is inherent in what he is, but he can use it inappropriately. Whenever projection is used inappropriately, it always implies that some emptiness or lack exists, and that it is in man's ability to put his own ideas there in the emptiness instead of the truth. The courses from the very beginning to the end, keep talking about this matter of emptiness or lack. In this 3D world, in the separation consciousness, we all have sickness called emptiness and lack. And then actually ever since I started the Course in Miracles study on a very deeper level myself, it was very interesting that I was this sense of emptiness, lack, which was seated deeply in my heart was coming to the surface. I didn't really realize what's happening, but I felt that I was so short of money, and then I did not have enough time to do more jobs, more work. So I was thinking to make money online, and then sounds good. So I tried. I failed so miserably so many times over the year of 2 years that I got scam after scam and scam. I was crying. I got like, so like, what's happening? I brought this matter of, being scammed, and then this matter of lack and emptiness. I didn't really realize how deeply it was seated in my heart. I had to bring that up to the Lord, because I thought I would never get scammed, but I got scammed so many times, and I am still recovering from it. And I'm just revealing, my failure, because the you know the Holy Spirit has to bring this sense of lack to the surface so I can look at it, so I can deal with it. I didn't know it was there. I had to look at it, deal with it, go through it, and being healed. So I'm in the process of being healed, of being scammed. And so this is real. The Lord is speaking to me. This is serious matter. That atonement is actually accepting who I really am. I am as God created me, and that this sense of lack and emptiness has to be healed for us to live. And then for us to live in a state that God created us to be, we need to operate in the state of abundance, not lack. But for this to be healed, it has to come up to the surface so we can look at it. That's what's happened to me, and then that's what I'm going through. If you consider carefully what this entails, the following will become quite apparent. First, the assumption is implicit that what God created can be changed by the mind of man. Second, the concept that what is perfect can be rendered imperfect and or wanting is accepted. Third, the belief that man can distort the creations of God, including himself, is accepted. Fourth, the idea that since man can create himself, the direction of his own creation is up to him is implied. These related distortions represent a picture of what actually occurred in the separation. None of this exists before, nor does it actually exist now. The world was made as a natural grand division or a projecting outward of God. This is why everything that he created is like him. Projection as undertaken by God is very similar to the kind of inner radiance which the children of the Father inherit from him. It is important to note that the term project outward necessarily implies that the real source of projection is internal. This is as true of the Son as of the Father. The world, in the original connotation of the term, included both the proper creation of man by God and the proper creation by man in his right mind. The latter required the endowment of man by God with free will, because all loving creation is freely given. Nothing in these statements implied any sort of level involvement, or in fact anything except one continuous line of creation in which all aspects are of the same order. When the lies of the serpent were introduced, they were specifically called lies because they were not true. When man listened, all he heard was untruth. He does not have to continue to believe what is not true unless he chooses to do so. All of his miscreations can literally disappear in the twinkling of an eye because they are merely visual misperceptions. Man's spiritual eye can sleep, but a sleeping eye can still see. What is seen in dreams seems to be very real. The Bible mentions that a deep sleep fell upon Adam, and nowhere is there any reference to his waking up. The history of man in the world as he sees it has not yet been marked by any genuine or comprehensive reawakening or rebirth. This is impossible as long as man projects in the spirit of miscreation. It still It still remains within him, however, to project as God projected his own spirit to him. In reality, this is his only choice because his free will was given to him for his own joy in creating the perfect. All fear is ultimately reducible to the basic misperception that man has the ability to usurp the power of God. This is actually laughable. Man has the ability to usurp the power of God. This is a basic misperception. This is laughable misperception. But the all fear is ultimately reducible to this basic misperception. And it can only be emphasized that he neither can nor has been able to do that. In this statement lies the real justification for his escape from fear. Because this is laughable misperception, we can be free from fear. The escape is brought about by his acceptance of the atonement. Atonement can be read at 1 month. We become one with God at 1 month atonement. So, which places him in a position to realize that his own errors never really occurred. When the deep sleep fell upon Adam, he was in a condition to experience nightmares because he was asleep. If a light is suddenly turned on while someone is dreaming a fearful dream, he may initially interpret the light itself as a part of his own dream and be afraid of it. However, when he awakens, the light is correctly perceived as a release from the dream, which is no longer accorded reality. It is quite apparent that this release does not depend on the kind of knowledge, quote unquote knowledge. So it doesn't talk about the real knowledge. It is quite apparent that this release does not depend on the kind of quote knowledge, quote end, which is nothing more than deceiving lies. The knowledge which illuminates, the real knowledge that illuminates rather than obscures, is the knowledge which not only sets you free, but which also knows you clearly that you are free. Whatever lies you may believe are of no concern to the miracle which can heal any of them with equal ease. It makes no distinctions among misperceptions. Its sole concern is to distinguish between truth on the one hand and all kinds of errors on the other. So some miracles may seem to be of greater magnitude than others, but remember the first point in this course, that there is no order of difficulty in miracles. In reality, you are perfectly unaffected by all expressions of lack of love. These can be either from yourself and others, or from yourself to others, or from others to you. Peace is an attribute in you. You cannot find it outside. Or mental illness is some form of external searching. If you keep looking for peace outside of you, you will not going to find it. That might cause mental illness. So mental illness is all some form of external searching. Mental health is inner peace. It enables you to remain unshaken by lack of love from without. So this peace enables you to remain capable through your own miracles of correcting the external conditions which proceed from lack of love in others. Chapter Roman numero 2, the reinterpretation of defenses. So what do you defend? Do you defend truth or untruth? When you are afraid of anything, you are acknowledging its power to hurt you. Remember that where your heart is, there is your treasure also. This means that you believe in what you value. If you are afraid, you are valuing wrongly. Human understanding will inevitably value wrongly. And by endowing all human thought with equal power, you will inevitably destroy peace. This is why the Bible speaks of the peace of God which passes human understanding. This peace is totally incapable of being shaken by human errors of any kind. So this peace denies the ability of anything which is not of God to affect you in any way. This is the proper use of denial. So it is not used to hide anything but to correct error. It brings all error into the light. Since error and darkness are the same, it corrects error automatically. True denial is a powerful protective device. You can and you should deny any belief that error can hurt you. This is a true denial. We do true denial that deny any belief that error can hurt you. This kind of denial, true denial, is not a concealment device, but a correction device. The right mind of the mentally healthy depends on it. You can do anything I ask. I have asked you to perform miracles. And I have made it clear that miracles are natural, corrective, healing, and universal. There's nothing good they cannot do, but they cannot be performed in the spirit of doubt. God and the souls He created are completely dependent on each other. The creation of the soul has already been perfectly accomplished, but the creation by souls has not. God created souls so He could depend on them. I get so encouraged. He created me, He created us, the souls, so He could depend on us because He created them perfectly. Without us, God is lonely. Without God, we are lonely. So we are meant for each other. He gave them His peace so they could not be shaken, would be unable to be deceived. Whenever you are afraid, you are deceived. Your mind is not serving the soul. This literally starves the soul by denying its daily bread. This is great. When our mind is not serving the soul, does not recognize the soul, just operating as the egoic split mind, that literally starves the soul. Soul needs to be nourished. The soul needs to be fed. The way to nourish the soul and feed the soul is that our mind serves the soul. God offers only mercy. Your words should reflect only mercy, because that is what you have received. That is what you should give. Justice is a temporary expedient or an attempt to teach man the meaning of mercy. Its judgmental side arises only because man is capable of injustice. If that is what his mind creates, you are afraid of God's will because you have used your own will, which He created in the likeness of His own, to miscreate. Because we use our own will to miscreate, that's why we are afraid of God's will. What you do not realize is that the mind can miscreate only when it is not free. An imprisoned mind is not free by definition. How our mind get imprisoned? When our mind denies the truth. The truth of what we really are, who we really are. We are, as God created us. So when the mind denies the truth, the mind gets imprisoned. So imprisoned mind is not free by definition. It is possessed or held back by itself. Its will is therefore limited and is not free to assert itself. The real meaning of one kind, which was mentioned before, is are of one mind or one will. When the will of the Son and the Father are one, their perfect accord is heaven. The denial of error is a powerful defense of truth. You will note that we have been shifting the emphasis from the negative to the positive use of denial. As we have already stated, denial is not a purely negative device. It results in positive miscreation. That's the way the mentally ill do employ it. Remember a very early thought of your own. Never underestimate the power of denial. In the service of the right mind, the denial of error frees the mind and reestablishes the freedom of the will. When the will is truly free, and it cannot miscreate because it recognizes only truth. Forced projection arises out of the forced denial, not out of its proper use. My own role in the atonement is one of the true projection. I can project to you the affirmation of the truth. If you project error to me or to yourself, you are interfering with the process. My use of projection, which can also be yours, is not based on faulty denial. It does involve, however, the very powerful use of the denial of errors. The miracle worker is the one who accepts my kind of denial and projection and unites his own inherent abilities to deny and project with mine and imposes them back on himself and others. This established a total lack of threat anywhere. Together we can then work for the real time of peace, which is eternal. The improper use of defenses is quite widely recognized. but their proper use had not been sufficiently understood as yet. They can indeed create man's perception both of himself and of the world. They can distort or correct depending on what you use them for. Denial should be directed only to error, and projection should be reserved only for truth. You should truly give as you have truly received. The golden rule can work effectively only on this basis. Intellectualization is a term which stems from the mind-brain confusion. Mind is mind level, and brain is a part of the body level. So two different levels. So it's like, but in this world is confused. So intellectualization is a term which stems from the mind-brain confusion. The right-mindedness is the device which defends the right mind and gives it control over the body. Intellectualization implies the split, while right-mindedness involves healing. Withdrawal is properly employed in the service of withdrawing from the meaningless. It is not a device for escape, but for consolidation. There is only one mind. Dissociation is quite similar. You should split off or dissociate yourself from error, but only in defense of integration. Detachment is essentially a weaker form of dissociation. Flight can be undertaken in whatever direction you choose, but note that the concept itself implies flight from something. Flight from error is perfectly appropriate. Distantiation can be properly used as a way of putting distance between yourself and what you should fly from. Regression is an effort to return to your own original state. It can thus be utilized to restore rather than to go back to the less mature. Sublimation, sub, sublimation, it should be redirection of effort to the sublime. There are many other so-called dynamic concepts which are profound errors due essentially to the misuse of defenses. Among them is the concept of different levels of aspiration, which actually result from level confusion. However, the main point to be understood from this section is that you can defend truth as well as error, and in fact much better. The means are easier to clarify after the value of the goal itself is firmly established. Everyone defends his own treasure. You don't have to tell him to do so because he will do it automatically. The real questions still remain: what do you treasure and how much do you treasure it? So do you treasure the egoic thought system, or do you treasure the Holy Spirit thought system? So we have to choose which one we are treasuring. Once you have learned to consider these two questions and to bring them into all your actions as a true criteria for behavior, I will have little difficulty in clarifying the means. You have not learned to be consistent about this as yet. I have therefore concentrated on showing you that the means are available whenever you ask. You can, however, save a lot of time if you do not extend this step unduly. The correct focus will shorten it immeasurably. The atonement is the only defense which cannot be used destructively. That's because while everyone must eventually join it, it is not a device which was generated by man. The atonement principle was in fact long before the atonement itself began. The principle was love, and the atonement itself was an act of love. Acts were not necessary before the separation because the time-space belief did not exist. It was only after the separation that the defense of atonement and the necessary conditions for its fulfillment were planned. It became increasingly apparent that all of the defenses which man can choose to use constructively or destructively were not enough to save him. It was therefore decided that he needed a defense which was so splendid that he could not misuse it, although he could refuse it. His choice could not, however, turn it into a weapon of attack, which is the inherent characteristic of all other defenses. The atonement thus becomes the only defense which is not a two-edged sword. The atonement actually began long before the crucifixion. Many souls offer their efforts on behalf of the separated ones, but they could not withstand the They could not withstand the strength of the attack and had to be brought back. Angels came too, but their protection did not suffice because separated ones were not interested in peace. They had already split their minds and were bent on further dividing rather than reintegrating. The levels they introduced into their minds turned against each other. They established differences, divisions, cleavages, dispersions, and all the other concepts related to the increasing splits which they produced. Not being in their right minds, they turned their defenses from protection to assault and acted literally insanely. It was essential to introduce a split-proof device which could be used only to heal if it were used at all. The atonement was built into the space-time belief in order to set a limit on the need for the belief and ultimately to make learning complete. The atonement is the final lesson. Learning itself, like the classrooms in which it occurs, is temporary. The ability to learn has no value when change of understanding is no longer necessary. The eternally creative have nothing to learn. Only after the separation it was necessary to direct the creative forces to learning because changed behavior had become mandatory. Men can learn to improve their behavior and can also learn to become better and better learners. This serves to bring them into closer and closer accord with the sonship. But the sonship itself is a perfect creation, and perfection is not a matter of degree. Only while there are different degrees is learning meaningful. The evolution of man is merely a process by which he proceeds from one degree to the next. He corrects his previous missteps by stepping forward. This represents a process which is actually incomprehensible in temporal terms because he returns as he goes forward. The atonement is the device by which he can free himself from the past as he goes ahead. It undoes his past errors, thus making it unnecessary for him to keep retracing his steps without advancing to his return. In this sense, the atonement saves time, but like the miracle which serves it, does not abolish it. As long as there is need for atonement, there is need for time. But the atonement as a completed plan does have a unique relationship time. Until the atonement is finished, its various phases will proceed in time, but the whole atonement stands at time's end. At this point, the bridge of the return has been built. The atonement is a total commitment. You still think this is associated with loss. This means in Christianity, um, the atonement means that the body of Jesus has to sacrifice to atone for the sins, our sins against God. So therefore, we are thinking that atonement is associated with sacrifice, with loss. But in the course, atonement is the inner acceptance that God's Son cannot be guilty, and God created him changeless, perfection. So different teaching. So here, this is the same mistake all the separate ones make in one way or another. They cannot believe that a defense which cannot attack is the best defense. This is what is meant by the meek shall inherit the earth. They will literally take it over because of their strength. A two-way defense is inherently weak, precisely because it has two edges and can turn against the self very unexpectedly. This tendency cannot be controlled except by miracles. The miracle turns the defense of atonement to the protection of the inner self, which, as it becomes more and more secure, assumes its natural talent of protecting others. The inner self knows itself as both a brother and a son. You know that when defenses are disrupted, there is a proof of the real disorientation, accompanied by fear, guilt, and usually vacillations between anxiety and depression. This course is different in that defenses are not being disrupted but reinterpreted, even though you may experience it as the same thing. In the reinterpretation of defenses, only their use for attack is lost. Since this means they can be used only one way, they become much stronger and much more dependable. They no longer oppose the atonement but greatly facilitate it. Atonement can only be accepted within you. You have perceived it largely as external thus far, but that is why your experience of the atonement has been minimal. The reinterpretation of defenses is essential in releasing the inner light. Since the separation, man's defenses have been used almost entirely to defend himself against the atonement, and thus maintain the separation. They themselves generally see this as a need to protect the body. The many body fantasies with which men's minds are engaged arise from the distorted belief that the body can be used as a means for attaining atonement. Perceiving the body as a temple is only the first step in correcting this kind of distortion. It alters only part of the misperception, but not all of it. It does recognize, however, that the concept of atonement in physical terms is not appropriate. However, the next step is to realize that temple is not a building at all. Its real holiness lies in inner altar around which the building is built. The inappropriate emphasis men have put on beautiful church buildings is a sign of their fear of atonement and their unwillingness to reach the altar itself. The real beauty of the temple cannot be seen with the physical eye. The spiritual eye, on the other hand, cannot see the building at all because it has a perfect sight. It can, however, see the altar with perfect clarity. For perfect effectiveness, the atonement belongs at the center of the inner altar, where the atonement undoes the separation and restores the wholeness of the mind. Before the separation, the mind was invulnerable to fear, and because fear did not exist, both the separation and the fear are miscreations of the mind, which must be undone. This is what is meant by restoration of the temple. It does not mean the restoration of the building, but the opening of the altar to receive the atonement. This heals the separation and places within man the one defense against all separation mind errors, which can make him perfectly invulnerable. The acceptance of the atonement by everyone is only a matter of time. In fact, both time and matter were created for this purpose. This appears to contradict free will because of the inevitability of the final decision. If you review the idea carefully, however, you will realize that this is not true. Everything is limited in some way by the manner of its creation. Free will can temporize and is capable of enormous procrastination, but it cannot depart entirely from its creator, who set the limits on its ability to miscreate by virtue of his own real purpose. The misuse of will engenders a situation which in the extreme becomes altogether intolerable. Pain thresholds can be high, but they are not limitless. Eventually, everyone begins to recognize, however dimly, that there must be a better way. As this recognition becomes more firmly established, it becomes a perceptual turning point. This ultimately reawakens the spiritual eye, simultaneously weakening the investment in physical sight. The alternating investment in the two types or levels of perception is usually experienced as a conflict for a long time and can become very acute, but the outcome is as certain as God. The spiritual eye literally cannot see error and merely looks for atonement. All the solutions which the physical eye seeks dissolves in this sight. The spiritual eye looks within, recognizes immediately that the altar has been defiled and needs to be repaired and protected. Perfectly aware of the right defense, it passes over all others, looking past error to the truth. Because of the real strength of its vision, it pulls the will into its service and impels the mind to conquer. This re-establishes the true power of the will and makes it increasingly unable to tolerate delay. The mind then realizes with increasing certainty that delay is only a way of increasing unnecessary pain. which it needs not tolerate at all. The pain threshold drops accordingly, and the mind becomes increasingly sensitive to what it would once have regarded as very minor intrusions of discomfort. The children of God are entitled to perfect comfort, which comes from a sense of perfect trust. Until they achieve this, they waste themselves and their true creative powers on useless attempts to make themselves more comfortable by inappropriate means. But the real means, which is atonement, is already provided and does not involve any effort at all on their part. And their egocentricity usually misperceives this as personally insulting, an interpretation which obviously arises from their misperception of themselves. Egocentricity and communion cannot coexist. Even the terms are contradictory. The atonement is the only gift that is worthy of being offered to the altar of God. This is because of the inestimable value of the altar itself. It was created perfect and is entirely worthy of receiving perfection. God is lonely without his souls, and they are lonely without him. Men must learn to perceive the world as a means of healing the separation. The atonement is a guarantee that they will ultimately succeed.